This is From Anxiety to Love Radio, the show about undoing anxiety through A Course in Miracles and other pathways of love. Gain insights and tools to deepen your awareness of the peace that already exists within you. I'm your host, Corinne Zupko, author of the award-winning and best-selling book, From Anxiety to Love. Welcome, everyone, to the From Anxiety to Love podcast. I am here today with a very special guest, Reverend Celeste Frazier. We're here today to talk about the Black Madonna, our Divine Mother. In the next episode, I'll be sharing my experience with how the Black Madonna entered my life. And back when this happened, I was hungry to dive deeper into learning more about her. Well, divine synchronicity would have it that at that time, which was back in summer 2021, Reverend Celeste was offering a class on the Black Madonna, and I knew then it was only a matter of time before I'd invite her to be here with us to introduce us to the Black Madonna. So before we dive in, I would just like to share Reverend Celeste's bio. Celeste Frazier is a spiritual leader, an inspirational speaker, and the stimulating podcaster of Mystic Magic, which can be found on most podcast venues. I love your podcast, by the way. She is a warm counselor who sees the beauty in you. She's a visioning facilitator and a passionate teacher and healer who seeks to reveal your divine light. Reverend Celeste directs Outreach Ministries, is a performer, author, and produced screenwriter. Reverend Celeste was the event coordinator and a keynote speaker for Celebrating Our Soul, a New Thought conference by people of African descent. She facilitates an online diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation and book study. Her books are available on Amazon and Kindle, and her new book, Common Miracles, Frequent Illusions, just came out in August. Her website is celestefrazier.com, and I'll bring in a link to your website, Reverend Celeste, in the show notes. Reverend Celeste, welcome. I'm so excited that you said yes and that you're here with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So where would you like to begin? I am just looking forward to everything that you have to say.
Well, I know that the focus is on the Black Madonna, and there is so much to be said, but there's more to be felt about her. There's something that is both primitive and creative about her. And because she actually exists in our DNA, many of us who are studying her understand about the love and surrender that kind of goes along with it. There's so much about that energy that remains with us, and that we can still rely on for our own healing. So there's a lot of mystery, but there's also a lot of knowledge that we can access.
I was just wondering, what do you mean by her being in our DNA?
The creative force of the Madonna is imprinted in the genetics of every human. I don't see her as just a separate entity, but as a force. And then there is, the connection that her daughter Sarah has. That's also like part of the grid of, the planet. And so I think that this transformative energy is available to us. There's a cultural memory that we can access. There's all kind of sites where there are statues and that energy, and no coincidence that there are healing streams nearby, because people have tapped into that and people have known that where the Black Madonna energy is a place for awakening and for expansion. Yeah. And so my experience of her has been subliminal. It's been informative, enlightening. And so as I explored it further, I have found many faces of her. Among the strongest of them is probably Isis, also represented by the Queen of Sheba, also represented by Mary, the mother of Jesus, also represented by Mary Magdalene, and so on and so on. But there are different secret societies that study, of her and about her, and a lot of mysteries in the south of France, particularly around the eastern Pyrenees in the region of Cathar. So there's a richness about the Black Madonna that is available and accessible.
Mm. So when you say that her daughter was Sarah, was that during one of her lifetimes here, one of her representations here on Earth?
The story that I choose to accept is when they left the area where Jesus was entombed, that there was a group of them that crossed the Mediterranean and went into that southern France region, and that they were kind of hidden away, but still exercising their power and still having an impact on wherever they were. And I think because the church was so determined to suppress that information, that they kind of went underground. And when I talk about Sarah, I'm talking about the child of Jesus and Magdalene. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking about a relationship that has never been honored, but has been diminished or distorted, or both. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We could have a whole conversation about the church and that suppression. And, one of the things that stands out to me from the class that I'd taken with you is the suppression of this force and how it cannot be suppressed. Can you speak to that?
I can attempt to. I can't explain the force, it just is. Mm-hmm. But there was so much of, particularly between the 4th and 6th centuries, where there were attempts to hide any traces of Magdalene. When there is this creatrix energy that came from, the void, it cannot be contained. It cannot be eliminated, And so the creative power lives in us, and as long as we're open and available to it, it can guide and direct us. It's mystical, it's mysterious, and it's magical. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard you say, and I just want to say this for our listeners who are new to learning about the Black Madonna, is that she can't be contained to one identity.
Right.
Can you speak to that?
Wow. Because this is intrinsic to all of us humans, and those of us who choose to accept her and invite her into our awareness and celebrate her and honor her, can be transformed by her and can be uplifted and renewed and enlightened by her. There is expressions from Africa, which I believe is the initial incarnation, that has been borrowed around the world, most predominantly in Europe, in South America, in places where there is a lot of adoration and respect for the Divine Mother. And, there's the key, I think, aspect of her as expressed through the Queen of Sheba. And even before that, in the creation story from the Yoruba religion, which is more ancient African theology, she was the female of the group of gods, and she was the goddess that from ancient times was dismissed. And so when Oludumare, who was like the main god, sent them to create, they ignored the woman and they came back with nothing. And Oludumare said, where is she? I suggest that you find her and beg her for your forgiveness if you want to do anything that's going to create anything. And so, they had to humble themselves to know that the creatrix was the key to everything coming into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear about the feminine being suppressed through that ancient story.
Yeah.
It's been happening for that long.
But, the power cannot be denied. Mm-hmm. I think that this whole thing around abortion is still about ovary envy, because men cannot produce life alone. Mm-hmm. There are some Gnostic writings that talk about a goddess who does not need the male energy to produce. Mm-hmm.
That's sure threatening.
There's more ovary envy than there is the other.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Wow. I'm wondering, this wasn't a question that I had thought to ask you until this moment. And you touched on this a little bit, but how do you relate to her on a daily basis? How does she show up for you?
In consciousness, as guide, as creativity. Mm-hmm. I get frustrated when she goes dormant, and I just have to be patient. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not like an on command performance. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to describe, Corinne. It's like information that comes through. It's consciousness. So mm-hmm. I probably evoke her more when I'm researching her, when I'm looking at different, groups or sites who are, promoting her. And, I think she feels more invited during those times. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, since most, I'm guessing, listeners to this podcast are students of A Course in Miracles, some people might be wondering, why isn't the Black Madonna in A Course in Miracles, even the feminine necessarily, explicitly? But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the Black Madonna and A Course in Miracles.
I'm pretty clear that the Holy Spirit is the energy that's being talked about throughout A Course in Miracles, and that it's not possible to eliminate her. I'm pretty clear that it is that level of understanding that brings me to my insights and brings me to a heightened awareness and cuts through all the nonsense and cuts through the fear and cuts through the unforgiveness and just places me squarely, in a higher awareness.
That's beautiful. So you're saying that for you, she comes through as the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You also said something when we were on another webinar together about being underneath the pages of A Course in Miracles. And I think we were having a discussion about something else, but I'm wondering if that's also relevant.
It is what I'm talking about, though. In A Course in Miracles, it's hard for me to explain because it seems internal, but it's clear. I can't put my finger on it. I can't show you anything tangible, but it's that level of understanding that whether I'm a teacher, a reader, listening, or whatever the case is, when I embark upon the course, is a level of understanding that is intrinsic. It's like nothing else I've ever read. I mean, I've had moments like that with the Bible, but on a consistent basis, it happens every time with the course.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. I loved how you used that phrase that, she's underneath the page, like she's between every word. She's there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Another question that I had mentioned to you previously is talking about why her Blackness matters. She is the Black Madonna. And for someone, again, who's listening, being a student of A Course in Miracles, maybe in a white body, thinking, well, wait a second, in truth, there's no form. So Black mattering, I'm wondering if you can say something to that.
Well, on one level, it has to do with the kind of mystery that we're talking about. If you look at even the first part of the Bible, God moved his face across the waters, I think he's really talking about a communion with the divine feminine, in terms of creation, because certainly no creation happened without her. And so that's, first of all, the unseen dimension, which is also associated with the dark sky or the dark waters of the earth, or the dark universes and galaxies and all of that. But in another sense, the beginning of humankind came from Africa, came from the country that produced tangible Black skin. And all of the ancient divinities originated from that sacred ground. And so every knockoff, whether it was a European knockoff in Poland or, a South American knockoff in Mexico, Guadalupe, wherever it was expressed, people were seeking to be able to identify themselves with her. So they made her in their image, right? Which we do all the time with the divine and trying to anthropomorphize that which needs no form. But if you're talking about the unseen, if you're talking about creative energy, if you're talking about the birth of life, you're talking about Blackness, you're talking about Africa. And, interestingly enough, when you ask that question, Black Lives Matter came across my mind. And, not as a movement with an agenda, but why not? Why would the original creator not come from the place of original creation? Yeah. I don't know why that's disputable. I
Agreed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
That's all very, very helpful to hear. And you're reminding me. Well, we one of the things I had mentioned too that I wanted to ask, and I feel like you've touched on this already, but it's just how can we avoid culturally appropriating, the Black Madonna in a way that is like, oh, cool, like now I'm gonna just like make her mine, and maybe doing so without the depth of relationship or education, awareness surrounding what it means. I'm just wondering around this idea of taking. How can we maybe avoid doing that?
I don't think she's restricted to a culture. Every culture pretty much has appropriated her.
Mm-hmm.
And to use that appropriation term seems negative, but in the sense, there is something about her that they need to know is being reflected in them. Mm-hmm. So whatever the shrine is, whatever the image is, it's an attempt to connect with Divine Mother. It's an attempt to see themselves in her rather than see her in themselves. Because I think the connection is just key. The celebration is key to unlocking the healing, to connecting at the level of the soul, to keep that connection and that vibration, in play. To create these shrines, to create these statues, helps to remind us that there's a greater power that we're really dependent on, and that the acknowledgement of that empowers us in ways greater than we could predict or imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The other thought that came to mind, the other question that came to mind too, is could you speak to the historical fact about Jesus and Mary not being white and whitewashing of the Black Madonna?
Well, Africa's Africa. When you come from a certain region, you look a certain way. And so the need to make the divine white comes from a need to feel important, empowered, impressive, to make oneself a god is something that people have been attempting to do since the beginning, I think. I think that the way people looked at kings or royalty or people of power was to deify them, and that seemed to help them feel a power that they wanted to achieve, that they wanted to acquire. And so I think that part of that is to create the impression that this is where the power is, that this is where the prosperity is, that this is where all creation starts. And so, a lot has been done, not only physically, but through language to manipulate people. I don't use the word God a lot because it kind of came from German conquerors. I use Elohim, which is more Hebrew, a little closer to, the origins, before everything kind of got distorted, a little closer to the Latin, where the real information lies, before it was distorted into all of these other languages, English being the most diluted of all, I believe. And so, so I study now more of ancient texts in the Hebrew and the Latin to get the vibration, to get the real understanding, instead of someone else imposing their agenda upon me in terms of my own spirituality. So, I'm not buying it. So I'm just looking for more source, primary material, so that I can understand what was meant for me to know.
You just mentioned something that brought my mind back to how you were describing the Black Madonna as a force. And these ancient texts that you say that you're, that you're studying from, I know that you've referenced the Gospel of Thomas before, and there's that quote, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And that has always, can you say anything about that?
Well, I know you like that particular quote from the Gospel of Thomas. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think that you can't ignore your divine destiny. You can't ignore truth. There's power in it. There's guidance in it. Just allowing is so key to creativity. It's so essential to real understanding, to see beyond the form, to get to the very spirit of everyone. It's just, you can ignore it if you want to have a very uninteresting life and a very, kind of a flat existence. You can try to dismiss it, but I think that brings more pain. And I don't think we can ever be destroyed, because we're all energy, and energy can only be requalified. It can't be destroyed. But the energy that you carry, it won't be as pleasant as if you accept the divine energy. Will be endless and full of blessings.
I like that quote just because it speaks to me of like the soul's calling. And if you don't listen to it, the divine mother's calling, the divine feminine, the Black Madonna's calling, if we don't listen to it, it eats you up. Like you're not fulfilling your function. And I have seen people resist that calling for whatever reason, and the angst that comes from not listening to that guidance. That's why I like that quote. Yeah. It makes me think of her and our soul's calling.
I think of that commercial about don't mess with Mother Nature. I don't know if it was a margarine commercial or whatever, but it was, kind of like saying respect, just respect the divine feminine, in order to be able to be fruitful, to multiply the consciousness, to take yourself out of the darkness and into the light,
That's a nice segue to another question that I had for you. And that is, what is the relationship between the Black Madonna and the earth, the divine feminine and the earth? I
guess by tapping into Mother Nature, you're still talking about that. I mean, I talked about the grid before, but I think that the seeds of everything are there, and that creative energy is the thing that grows from the seed, and that it's being directed by this energy. It's like the seed is being planted into the soil, but the soil is really the producing power. It kind of makes for everything to come into being. Like now when the rain is starting to come back and the the moisture is being held under the earth, right, until the spring season, when there's a genius there. There's a process there that is constant and dependable, and it's the Divine Mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've been so helped by, because A Course in Miracles, I feel like in some cases can easily bring us up into our heads, into a lot of thought. And recently having experiences of really feeling deeply connected to the earth, grounded, and even seeing, my body as like a plant, like being of the earth, the body
Mm-hmm.
being of the earth, the mind,
Mm-hmm.
being of God, but the body being of the earth, having this whole new experience of her, and feeling like I can rest in that, like I can go outside and lay on the ground and feel held by her, like held
Yeah.
like by the entire planet.
Yeah, I think the original expression of the maiden was that the female is that expression of her that promulgates the population that is, the vessel, right, through which life is continued. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. Another thought that came to mind earlier too, just in your speaking about the Black Madonna in A Course in Miracles, as the Holy Spirit. I often think of the Hebrew translation of A Course in Miracles, and they refer to the Holy Spirit as she, which I've always really appreciated, since ours is so masculine sounding.
Yeah. There's so much to the female as a creation that is the guide, the guide of Adam. Adam wasn't able to really do much. He was kind of following, but the narrative is that, he was directing things, right? But the creatrix, the nurturer, the instigator, the pushing forward of her sons, and moving the process forward of expanding the family, all of that came from Ishe, which is Eve. This whole notion of her being the criminal who messed up everything is so distorted and a ploy for domination, or an attempt at domination. I when I don't know, it must have been about a month or so ago when I was speaking, I was like, you don't understand the distortion of language, because if you go back and you really look at what the word Lord means and the word lady means in more ancient languages, then you see that the Lord distributes the bread, but the lady makes the bread. Like there would be no commerce without her producing, the substance.
Wow. speaking of Eve, you also reminded me, I read somewhere about the serpent and how the serpent, it was known that that was the symbol for the feminine. And somebody then decided to make it the evil thing, you know, in the Garden of Eden story, in order to diminish the power of the feminine. I can't remember where I listened to that, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you know, the serpent is another expression of teacher. You know, he wasn't talking to Adam because Adam wouldn't have been able to understand, you know. But if you want knowledge, then, you know, people, well, living beings will gravitate toward that which is beneficial. They won't gravitate towards that which cannot help them move forward, you know.
Right.
I think that's intrinsic in life energy. If you just look at nature, the direction that, you know, plants are moving towards is the sun, you know, either deeper into the earth to get rooted or toward the sun to expand, you know, and both are necessary.
Right.
And both are indicative of divine feminine and, you know, Mother Nature.
It's like that grounding. What I've been learning recently is just about, again, when you're grounded into the earth, your body is grounded. It's like those upper chakras can then open more, because just like you're describing, there's that balance there.
Yeah, it's all kind of built in.
Wow. Yeah. I don't really feel like I have other questions. I just am sitting, just absorbing everything that you're saying. Does anything come to mind for you that you would want listeners to know?
Did you ask all the questions you wanted to ask? I feel like there's something
I did.
else.
Yeah. I think.
Okay. I would just say that being still is so important to being able to listen. We say a lot of things with our thoughts, and thoughts are things, and they are creative. And we need to be vigilant about what those thoughts are, and maybe invite in, you know, call her Black Madonna, call her Divine Feminine, Divine Mother, for guidance, and to allow, you know, a new dimension. Be willing to enlist her help in creating, and in understanding the nature of life, which will help us to understand the nature of who we are and everybody around us.
That's beautiful, Reverend Celeste. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love just that idea of calling her in. And you just remind me too of, and I'm coming from, you know, my own perspective of having been very, for some time, like strict with, like, you know, the words on the page of A Course in Miracles, and open, of course, to nuance. But I've really been brought into that characteristic in the manual for teachers on open-mindedness. And I feel like, you know, for anybody listening who has been like me in terms of, you know, this Black Madonna, divine feminine, not necessarily appearing in words, but you're saying, you know, Holy Spirit, that having that open-mindedness allows for what you just described. It allows for that relationship to develop, that willingness, that openness to ask for guidance, to have that relationship with her and experiences through her.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Really important.
Thank you. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
You can't think that stuff into understanding. It has to be that dimension that has no form, that really cuts through all of the dividedness and distortions and illusions, lies and misperceptions, all of the tricks of the ego, all of the stuff that really destroys us rather than expand us.
Wow. Thank you. I would love it. I want to leave space too if you have anything else that you'd like to share before we go. But I would also love to, if you feel complete, I'd love to have you just share how everyone can find you. I mentioned your website at the beginning, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But just what you're up to, what you're offering. Feel free to go there if you feel ready.
Sure. CelesteFrazier.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube. I am on Twitter. My book, Common Miracles, Frequent Illusions, the latest one. I also have 2 other books, Divine Workplay and In Spirit, in Love. You can Google those. You can find them on Amazon. You can, look at my site to see what's there in terms of what I do, counseling and my writings and my podcast and, the ways that I express in the world. It may not always be up to date. And if you want more, just ask, because my app I also have, which is called Conscious Grace, and it's available on Apple and Google. So the web. And I haven't been as active on there, but I plan to be more active on there in the coming months. So there are some recordings there, but there's also going to be more live sessions there as well.
Awesome. That's great to know.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's been such a pleasure, Reverend Celeste. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And I also just want to put another plug for your podcast, Mystic Magic. Everybody should definitely check that out, and your books as well. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation and your willingness to have a conversation.
Wasn't that a lovely conversation? As usual, post-interview, I'd like to share some takeaways from this episode. There are many takeaways to choose from, and I'd love to hear yours, so I invite you to leave a comment on the show notes page at FromAnxietyToLove.com/33. There, you will also find links to connect with Reverend Celeste, and please go follow her. Here are 4 of my takeaways. These are all things Reverend Celeste shared in this episode. Number 1, the Black Madonna has many faces and cannot be contained to one identity. She is the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis, the Queen of Sheba, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mother Earth, and more. Number 2, the Black Madonna is in our DNA. For she is not a separate entity, but a force that exists in all of us. This feminine, creative force ultimately cannot be suppressed, although that suppression has been attempted for centuries. Number 3, when it comes to A Course in Miracles, the Black Madonna is the energy behind every page of the Course. It is not possible to eliminate her. For Reverend Celeste, the Black Madonna comes through as the Holy Spirit's energy, which is that level of understanding that brings insights, cuts through the nonsense, the unforgiveness, as Reverend Celeste said, and lifts you straight to higher awareness. And number 4, Jesus and Mary were not in white bodies. When I asked Reverend Celeste a question about this historical fact, she said, when you come from a certain region, you look a certain way. She spoke about how not only has there been manipulation through the physical, like for instance the whitewashing of Jesus and Mary, but through language too. So she's been studying ancient texts, Hebrew and Latin, going back to the source to get to the vibration of the teachings, rather than through someone else who may be consciously or unconsciously imposing their agenda. Personally, to me, this highlights the importance of being able to see the filters through which we see, so we can understand how we have been influenced by a Western white perspective. There are more takeaways, of course, but I want to hear from you. Come leave your takeaways on the show notes page at FromAnxietyToLove.com/33. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am with you in your journey of undoing fear. I'll leave you with the last few sentences in my book, From Anxiety to Love. I believe in you. We're healing together. Every gain that I've made is a gain for you, and every gain that you make is a gain for me. My gains are yours and yours are mine because we are one. We're going to make it. The light in you is too bright to fail. If you buy a copy of From Anxiety to Love, make sure you take advantage of your free bonus, which is 3 free tracks from the From Anxiety to Love meditation album. Get access at FromAnxietyToLove.com/meditations. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.